the worst and most destructive being pornography,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? So
The
like,
fitness payoff of procreation,
yeah,
but being used in a way in which it doesn't ever actually procreate. Right. So, like virtual reality and perception, Hoffman compares our perception of the world to virtual reality. When you wear a VR headset, you experience a simulated environment that feels real, even though it's entirely constructed by software. In VR, you can interact with objects and navigate the environment, but everything you see is a representation, not the actual physical world. Right. So he kind of goes on to show that. So these examples in chapter 1 of his book lay a foundation for Hoffman's argument that our perceptions are akin to a user interface designed by evolution to be practical and efficient for survival, but not necessarily accurate in revealing the true nature of reality around us. So he then goes on to talk about, through evolution, fitness over truth. And then he gives some examples of how that's prevalent. So, one of his central claims is that evolution favors fitness over truth. He uses the concept of fitness payoffs to explain that organisms evolved to maximize their chances of survival, not to perceive reality accurately. So these fitnesses or fitness payoffs are essentially, traits that we've inherited genetically that enable us to procreate and survive, essentially. So he gives some funny examples, though, of how these fitness payoffs can sometimes cause us to do things that are stupid, right?
yeah,
Because we don't perceive the truthfulness of the situation. Now, he gives examples in the animal kingdom primarily. So, like, he discusses a case of the jewel beetles in Australia, which evolved to seek out mates by identifying certain visual cues like color and texture. However, beer bottles left by humans in the environment, which happen to reflect light in a way that mimics these cues, attracts the beetles. So the beetles mistake the beer bottles for ideal mates and attempt to copulate with them, leading to a significant fitness cost, right? And then the beetle's perception system is not designed to accurately identify mates in all contexts, but rather to quickly identify what usually indicates a suitable mate. This system works well in a natural environment where the cues usually indicate other beetles. However, it fails in the presence of artificial objects that trigger the same perceptions but do not lead to successful mating. That I find super interesting, just that concept that this cue functions in a natural environment but does not function in the presence of artificial objects. You think about reality today. How many artificial objects do we have that we interact with? Almost our entire world is man-made. It's not natural. It's artificial.
hmm
And so you think about our fitness payoffs interacting with the non-natural world.
yeah,
That makes our perception of truth even more difficult, right? And then you have, these man-made contraptions that have learned how to prey on our fitness payoffs, right? So, like, for example, social media. I was watching a podcast from Joe Rogan where he was talking to the head of humane technology for Meta. And his job was to make sure that the algorithm was being used in a humane way. What he found out was that it was not. Wrote this, large paper to the would-be leaders at Meta and quickly got fired. But the gist of his paper was that what he had found was that the algorithm was essentially hacking the human brainstem, and it realized that maximal engagement was achieved through polarization and enraging. So what it was doing was it was taking these ideas that are fairly close, but causing them to look like they're not, and causing people to be divisive, polarizing, every topic that it could, so that we felt like we were super far apart when in reality we were fairly close, 98% overlap.
yeah,
But the 2% where we don't have overlap, it's extrapolating into these huge problems. And then what it's doing is through that polarization, it's feeding you content that makes you angry, that enrages you.
Mhm.
Well, you think about, what is that doing to the social fabric of society? Like, how polarized are we today between religion and science, Democrat, Republican, black, white? I mean, just on and on and on. It essentially creates this group identity thing. But the problem becomes that we have this fitness payoff where when someone is, opposed to us, it can cause us to be angry. But it's like that anger doesn't serve us well when it's being manipulated by a fictitious algorithm
Mhm.
that's utilizing our fitness payoffs in ways that aren't productive for us in order to maximally engage us on a platform where it can generate revenue. It's like, yeah, so it becomes difficult sometimes to, in these artificial circumstances, to control our inherited genetic fitness payoffs in ways that function properly amidst man's, creations.
I mean, there's a whole practical application here with any form of media, but maybe the worst and most destructive being pornography,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? So,
The
like,
fitness payoff of procreation,
yeah,
but being used in a way in which it doesn't ever actually procreate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the wildest idea that, like, it's, again, your file example.
Yes.
This is on a screen.
Yes.
This is not real.
It's us mating with a bottle,
We're
just like the beetle.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are trying to mate with a bottle.
Yep.
If you watch
They've
pornography.
hacked that fitness payoff.
Yeah.
In a way in which they can monetize it. So it's like, yeah, the problem becomes that the truthfulness of society around us, very difficult to perceive through our senses,
Totally.
right? Which lends to Hoffman's idea that we don't perceive the truthfulness of reality through space and time.